Welcome to segment 5 in the Choose You This Day Whom You Will Serve series. In the last segment, you saw what the day of the Lord will look like, what the conditions will be, and what will take place when that happens. In this segment, you're going to see that even though people question, like they've been saying that for 2,000 years, you're going to see what is different from 2,000 years ago and even 200 years ago, and which makes the reality of his coming that much more of a reality. And I'm going to read to you in 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 9, how God tells his children that it will not come upon us as it will the world, because we are of the day and we are of the light. So I'm going again to read 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 9. But the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night, for which they shall say peace and safety. Then sudden destruction comes upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. You are all children of the light and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep, as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, for a helmet and the hope of salvation. For God has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ. And in the last number of years, God called my friend Jessica Baker and I to be those watchmen. And he really had us studying storms to say, how do you know a storm's coming? You know, what are the conditions that you can clearly see a storm is coming? And so he had us paying attention to that. And he used that to assure us in that same way that we talked about in the last segment. He told us what those conditions would look like so that we would know a storm was truly coming. And so in that, I'm going to share with you some facts about what is different now today than it was 2,000 years ago and even 200 years ago. And I'm going to start with that Israel is back. In 17 AD, Israel was destroyed and kind of went extinct and was not. But back in 1867, a man named Charles Warren, he became known as the pioneer of Jerusalem archaeology. He began and he discovered part of Jerusalem, which led to the excavation of not only Jerusalem, but bringing Israel back. It was kind of like the resurrection of Israel coming back into existence after 2,000 years. That just is amazing. And after he started bringing the land back, God needed the people back. And in 1917, Israel was kind of under the Palestinian or Ottoman control, and they began, because of financial problems, they began opening their borders up to foreigners. Well, just so happens some Jewish people began buying up that land, and it continued on until one of the biggest influxes was the Holocaust. As horrible as the Holocaust was, it is what got many of your Jews to go back to Israel. And since that time, Israel began to grow and build. And then on May 14th, 1948, it was proclaimed to the world that Israel had officially returned as a nation. And just 11 minutes after that was proclaimed, President Harry S. Truman recognized Israel as a country. And note, right after the declaration of God, that declaration, God began to bless America. It was then that God began to really bring about the blessings that America knows today and so loves. But this is also what you will see in further segments, the same time that as soon as God brought and was resurrecting Israel and blessing America for protecting her and recognizing her, Satan not only wanted to destroy Israel, it already also wanted to destroy America, the one who was acknowledging her existence and helping to protect her. And so then it was on June 7th, 1967, after the 6-Day War, during it, that Israel seized Jerusalem and once again gained control after over 2,000 years. And it's no coincidence. There's never a coincidence with our God. God resurrected Israel, and the Jewish people brought them back for an appointed time. Well, after 1967, it's always the ruling leader that kind of has to recognize different things into existence. Well, no president really wanted to mess with that. They didn't want to say, yes, Jerusalem is definitely the capital, because they were kind of afraid to stir up anybody. But in December 6, 2017, President Trump was not afraid to, he's really not afraid of anybody. And so therefore, on that day, he officially declared Israel to be once again the capital, Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he even moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Well, not only on that time in 1948 was Israel back, but that was also the resurrection of the Palestinian or the Palestine enemy of God also being resurrected. Because in 1947, the United Nations approved the land of Israel, that it would be divided between the Jewish state and an Arab state. And the all-Palestinian protectorate came into existence in 1948, the exact same time that Israel came into existence. But their purpose was to totally destroy and nullify that, because they were saying, no, we want all the land and we do not want to share it. And the only way to get it is to destroy. So with that, and it goes all the way back down to the Gaza Strip and them taking control of that. Well, all of this found its roots in a man that worked with Hitler. And they were able to work together because their main goal was to get rid of the Jewish people. They felt like, oh, the Jewish people are going to take over the world and we just need to get rid of them because they're just like these little roaches that need to be exterminated. And so this man was able to connect and work with Hitler. And then it was through him that man known, he ended up becoming known as like the Mafia, which is kind of like a Islamic leader. But he trained a young man that ended up coming to the Gaza Strip, and through that is where Hamas was born. Hamas came into existence on December 10th, 1987, and Hamas took control of the government in 2007, and he took control of that Gaza Strip. And when they did, they began teaching their doctrine in the school system, and basically that was terrorism. They built over 300 miles of tunnels And in those tunnels were where they were conspiring to find an opportunity to eliminate the Jewish people. And they are not dummies. They built their control centers under schools, hospitals, and other civilian places so that those people could be their human shield. So, because they know that in war, you don't go after civilians, which we're seeing kind of happening now. But they purposely put their people in danger and put their people as their human shields. And so Hamas was born, Hamas grew, took over the government, trained, built these tunnels, and have been working endlessly since then until the day on October 7th, 2023, when they found and looked for the opportunity to say, go. Let's go and destroy those Jewish people. And that was probably the biggest onslaught to Israel since the Holocaust, which we know is still currently going on today. And so with that, we must understand that that is one thing that is back and is different, is that Israel's back and Israel's enemy is back. And they're back in the exact same places they were in the ancient times. All right, so with that, we want to also see that those same people who are enemies of God, Hamas, they are also enemies of America. They do not like America because we were the ones, again, which we just talked about, who officially declared them as a country and Jerusalem as its capital. And we protect them unto this day. Because remember, God said he'll bless those who bless Israel and he'll curse those who curse. So as long as we've been under that umbrella of being there for Israel, God continues to bless us. And we want to remember who these enemies are. And if we've forgotten, we need to remember 9/11. That was these terrorists that attacked us. And remember, God began blessing us when we began blessing, acknowledging, and protecting Israel. Well, notice the two buildings that the terrorists attacked. It was the Twin Towers, which were our economics, that God blessed us materially and economically. We have become the economic power. The Pentagon was the other one, and that is where the Department of Defense is, our defense. They tried, but I believe God was the one who intervened. They tried to attack the White House, but God's not totally done with America yet. So that wasn't allowed. All right. So not only is Israel back, not only are the enemies of Israel back, but the ancient gods that were back in 2,000 plus years ago are back as well. And at the same time that God used Charles Warren to begin to dig up, let's say, Jerusalem and resurrect, Israel and Jerusalem, Satan had his founder as well. And his name is Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, he was quoted in one of the books he wrote that religion that they call Christianity, the devil that they call God, it is their God and their religion that I hate and will destroy. He was known as the influencer of modern Satanism. He was born in England in 1875, again, right around that time that God was using Charles Warren to resurrect Israel. But he would become known as one of the most wicked men that ever lived. And he actually grew up in the church, but because the church hurt, he turned and had a deep hatred for God. And he was part of the 33rd degree Freemason, And Freemason is a secret organization that looks innocent on the first or so levels, that they seem good and even call themselves Christians. And in their practices, they do use the Bible and they talk about Jesus, but it is not in a right and proper manner. And so he created a religion. It was a new magical hybrid brand of black magic, and it was said to supersede Christianity, that his goal was to become higher than God. And remember, that was Satan from the beginning. He didn't want God to have any glory. He not only wanted the glory that should rightly go to God, he wanted to go above it, and he wanted it. And he believed in the eye of Horus, which that eye is on the back of our dollar bill. And notice there's a pyramid there, and that pyramid is not capped. And what that kind of represents too is the Tower of Babel. Remember, God disturbed them, and they're kind of wanting to cap that pyramid. And so he was part of that. And so he was one that studied Hindu and Buddhism, which then helped him to further understand magic and other dimensions. He was always in search for that hidden knowledge. And that's where people need to be very, very careful. Because if God is not leading you to research something, don't go research it just because you want to. It's a scary place to be, because you are going into a dark domain, and without God's leading and God's permission, you can get sucked in and go places that you don't want to go and go deeper than you want to go. So it is best just to stay away from things. And that is a caution I will give as we are going to be talking a little bit more about darkness and the reality of it being out there. And the reason, again, that I believe God is having me do this is because it's infiltrated everything, even the church. And we need to take this seriously and be able to combat it and be able to see the reality of it enough to get out there and do something. Okay, so another thing that Aleister Crowley did is he taught himself how to think backwards physically, in writing, in walking, and speaking, reading, and symbols, because those things are used in music and television and movies and books as part of a curse or a ritual that is not of God. The first music group to adopt his teachings were the Beatles. And the Beatles even have his logo on some of their album covers. And a lot of times when you're trying to go to the next level or gain more knowledge, you need to do rituals. And some of those rituals are dark and deep. And I'm not even going to go there, but many of them are same sex and things that are totally contrary to God. And so it's not an accident that Israel's back. It's not an accident that the ancient gods are back. It is not an accident that Israel's enemy's back. And it's not an accident that God has really been waking up the church and showing us this reality. It's because Israel's here for a appointed time, and those of us who are alive at the speaking of this or the hearing of this, God has a purpose and a plan for you. And that purpose and the plan is to glorify and represent him well, and to bring the gospel into the darkness, because the gospel, God's light, is the only thing that can expel the darkness, which we will see in future segments. In the next segment, I'm going to share and begin to share with you the breakdown of America's strengths. Because in order for the enemy to come in, he has to get America weak. And he has to break it up enough where he's able to slip in. So in the next segment, stay tuned to find out how Satan has begun to do this. And you're going to see in segments after that how it just begins to snowball. So I look forward to you tuning in to the next session.